Hey, what's up everybody? It's TheHyphenate here, and today I'm going to show you guys how to easily edit a time lapse in pretty much any video editing software. I'm going to show you guys in DaVinci Resolve, though the fundamentals here and each step is going to be pretty much the same across all other softwares, including Premiere Pro, Vegas Pro, Final Cut, etc. Now here I have a folder filled with my photos of my time lapse. As you can see, I have 720 photos in total. Now a real time lapse consists of photos taken with a camera using a time-lapse mode or an intervalometer that will take a set amount of photos with a certain amount of time between them, all depending on what settings you chose. Now in this video, I'm not going to show you guys how to capture a time-lapse. I'm going to just show you guys how to edit the time-lapse. If you want to know how to capture a time-lapse, I do have other videos on this channel that show you that process. So here, I'm going to assume you've already got all your photos ready, you've already edited them, and now you're ready to create a time-lapse video. Before you drag and drop all these files into your timeline, you first need to go to your editing software and change the default duration of a still image. Now, depending on what software it is, it might be under options or preferences. For DaVinci Resolve, it's on the top left under preferences, user, editing, general settings, and then standard still duration. Now, what you want to do is make sure that you are set to 1 frame for your duration or length for each still image. You do not want to do more than 1 frame. It's very important that each photo needs to be 1 frame in length. Then go ahead and press save. Now the next step before you drop your photos is to choose your project settings. You need to know if you're going to output your time lapse in 1080p, in 4K, 8K, etc. And you need to know the frame rate, 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, etc. So whatever you want your final video to be, make sure your project is set as that before dropping in the photos. For DaVinci Resolve, we're going to go to File, Project Settings. For my project, I'm going to be outputting in 4K, 24 frames per second, and in 10-bit video. Now you can go ahead and drop in your files. Now you can either import them through your software, or you can click on your first file, select all, and then drag from that first file directly into your timeline. Now, if you zoom in, you should see each photo will be a separate frame. But in certain software like DaVinci Resolve, when you drag and drop a group of photos, it automatically puts it into 1 clip. So if I go ahead and press play, you'll actually see the time lapse already going. Now, the problem here is that you actually have these black bars on the sides because the ratio in camera was not set to 16:9. But if I go to the properties to these photos, you can see here the dimensions 4240 by 2832. So I'm easily over 4K, which now is going to allow me to be able to crop to end up filling up the frame. Now you want to make sure that the resolution of your photos or the dimensions are larger or at bare minimum the exact resolution needed for the resolution that you're outputting your video. So if you have smaller files than 4K, you should probably do a 1080p time lapse. Otherwise you're going to be stretching out pixels. So you can always have a higher resolution photo cropped to a slightly lower resolution video. But you don't want lower resolution photos stretched out to higher resolution video. Now in different editing programs, you have different ways to crop or zoom in to fill your frame. With DaVinci Resolve, all I have to do is have the sequence selected, go under the inspector on the top right, under video and transform, start to zoom in, and now my frame is filled and I have no black bars. Now, because I did just zoom in, I'm losing some information on the bottom and on top. And as you can see, this US bank building in downtown LA is actually being cut off. And I actually care more about that than I do this street. So I'm going to go ahead and change the position Y, which is vertical, and move that up till I get the frame that I want without any black bars. And now if I press play, it is definitely where I want it to be. Now, one thing I did notice is that my first frame had a little bit of movement compared to my second and third frame. And that's usually because when I first start the time lapse and I press the shutter button, there's a little bit of shake or vibration still happening in camera. So what I normally do is I usually trim the first few frames and then go ahead and start it a little later. And just to be on the safe side, I usually do the same with the last few frames. I trim those out. Now this time lapse was shot using a motorized slider, so there's actually more movement in here. But editing a motion time lapse or a static time lapse is the same process. You can see here the motion that's happening with my slider. It's sliding to the right and it's also panning to the left at the same time, which makes it a lot more dynamic. Now, if the resolution of your photos is still a lot higher than the resolution of your video, then you can actually automate additional zooming in or out to simulate a dolly effect. You just have to put your start point and then your end point. Now, generally, you just put a keyframe in the beginning and then a keyframe at the end. So if I wanted to slightly punch in towards the top buildings, in DaVinci Resolve, to set a keyframe, I go to the little diamond here. Make sure that my cursor is at the beginning of the clip first and the clip selected. Click the little diamond to activate the automation keyframe. Then go ahead and move to the end. And now I can adjust the zoom a little bit if I want and the position, so long as I'm not going beyond the frame and creating black bars. Also, if you're doing any type of automated zooming, you definitely don't want to zoom past your resolution. Now that I have my keyframes, if I start from the beginning, you'll see not only is it doing its motion time lapse, but it's also slowly moving in and towards the top, zooming in a little bit more. So you can actually see here that the automation is actually moving in real time. You can actually see the position and the zoom happening more and more. Now, I did a very subtle amount, so you can barely notice it if you look on this screen, but here on the transform information, that's definitely not lying, so you know that it is moving in that direction. If I want to make it a little bit more extreme just to show you guys, I'm gonna zoom in more and change the position. And then if I go ahead and press play, you'll see instantly with that big exaggeration that it is zooming in while it's moving. Now the final step is to render out your video file. Do that as you normally would on whatever editing software you're using. For DaVinci Resolve, we go to deliver. And again, I am doing a 4K file, so I'm gonna go ahead and change my format to MP4, codec H.265, which is what I do now normally. 4K resolution, 24 frames per second, and I'll leave the quality at best. Name your file, add to render queue, and then go ahead and render all. So there you guys have it. That's how simple it is to edit a time lapse in pretty much any video editing software. Again, the fundamentals are the same across all the different programs. Make sure that you shot your time lapse with photos. You're not gonna speed up video, you're gonna use photos. Choose your project settings, resolution, and frame rate. Make sure that each photo is only 1 frame in length. Zoom or crop in as needed to fill the frame, and then go ahead and render it. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, please drop a like on this video, drop a comment below if you have any questions, and please make sure to subscribe. I have a lot more videos coming soon. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.